Well, let me preface it by saying that I wanted to take a more broad approach to kind of what my philosophy is anyway on, I call it customer feedback, voice of customer, whatever, because I think there's a fundamental like disconnect really between what that means and why it's important. And then a little bit of, hey, these are some ideas. Because as I even stated last time we met, I think that each person, and that's why, I mean, I know we're slim today. I told several other people I've met with a couple of them, like, you probably need some one-on-one time to figure out the best way to get any kind of customer feedback you need. But I think more it's the philosophy of it and it's the usage of it. And us as small business owners really need to try to figure out a way to resonate with the customers that we are trying to get to, or else we won't grow, right? So that's why I call it customer feedback as an FYI, not just surveys. I'm sure you guys all know this, but if we're talking about voice of customer as a whole, it's like probably one of the most broadly used, oh, do you have a VOC? Oh, do you have a VOC? Especially in a corporate world. Otherwise, you could maybe talk about NPS and you hear customer satisfaction a lot in a B2C space, right? It's a very, very widely used thing, but I think if you really care to understand what it is trying to identify what a customer or a person or a business thinks, feels, and says, right? Because if you're not capturing all three of those things, then really you're not going to be understanding the voice of the customer, right? So if you are only gonna ask them what they feel, or you're not going to ask them why they feel the way they do, or you're not going to try to understand why they even felt it in the first place, then you're really not getting to a full voice of customer. The last thing I will say, which again is something that took me personally, I've taught this for forever, right? And told my customers that they need to use it to help with their sales and marketing and growth. But like as a business owner, I never actually ever used market research myself for the longest time, because I really believed, well, if I know how to teach this, then I don't need to go and understand and use it for my materials. I was super impressed last month even when Sonia was talking about creating those stories and storytelling and what that meant. My first thought was, oh my gosh, why haven't I done my own market research study in order to identify what story I should have that would resonate with my customers? And so I think as a business owner, we waste too much time trying to create an idea ourselves or try to please a customer that we have versus understanding their whole life cycle. So I want to start talking about what kind of survey is needed. I'm going to use at one point even something that I teach my clients when I'm trying to get them to decide what kind of market research study they need to do. But the important thing to know is that customers will feel differently about you, about your product, about your service, about your employees at any stage in their journey. And customer is not just necessarily the person that you interact with. It could also be others within their organization. It could be your employees. It could be an executive sponsor that doesn't actually buy anything, or a partner. It could be anything, right? But when we think customer, really what you're trying to do is who will impact my business, right? Who am I serving? So I always tell people before you decide what type of survey you need to initiate for any customer, you need to first ask, what are you trying to solve with that feedback? I mentioned this last month, but okay, we all want to get customer feedback or testimonials, and we all think that's important. But what I would ask you to do first is to say, why are you trying to get it, right? What is the reason that you are seeking feedback, and what are you going to do with it, right? Because depending on where you are in your personal journey as well, it will be different. Some of the examples, which again, a lot of you already are doing, you just want to understand overall satisfaction, right? Hey, at the end of the day, I want to know, do people like what I do? Sometimes it's, hey, I want to know what would compel someone to spend money with me, or what compels them to walk into my store but then not purchase anything. Like what what didn't resonate, or maybe what other competitors in the market, right? What similar businesses are doing what I am doing, and is it, different, or is it pricing, or is it whatever, gaining insight on that competitive side. Sometimes people just want to get customer feedback in order to build up their own brand, right? Testimonials or reputation, and getting yourself kind of high on the list on an NPS score. Like, there are different triggers that will make you want to get customer feedback, but you first need to know, okay, why? Why am I doing this? What am I trying to solve? This is what I use for my clients, okay? And I'll go into each of these, but I've tried to make it super simple. And I've said, like earlier I said, right, your customer, whoever that customer is, changes through every stage of their journey with you. So then what you need to think is, okay, well, how do I identify the stage, quote unquote, that I need to spend my time surveying? And I call them 5 different buckets. There's 5 different buckets of C's. I'll go into each of them, but one is collection, one is conversation, one is care, one is commitment, and then one is culture. So if you were to, dwindle it all down, and most of these, as you go through, you'll probably understand, but collection, conversion, care, commitment, and culture. And this is, again, even with these large corporations that I talk to, I say, you need to do market research, but you need to pick one of these 5 things. It doesn't mean you can't do all of them, but think of your objective first and hit on one of these 5 stages, and then move on to the next depending on what your pain points are.
So hold on.
Yeah.
Go back there. So we're saying where they're, those are obviously different journeys,
yes.
for the customer, right? So they're saying we're going to focus on we need to get more people through the door, so we're going to focus on collection and conversion, right, or something like that.
Yeah. So yes, exactly. So for
we
and so,
great, but we want to keep them, so we want to go to commitment and focus on that.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Now here's the difference, right? People who are these larger entities, these huge businesses and whatever, that's why they come to someone like me to say, okay, Mackenzie, I have this problem today, right? Like, I spend $10 million a year on marketing events, but my ROI is nothing, right? And I need to know why I'm not converting those marketing events to leads. Right? I need to be able to tell them, okay, well, this is actually your problem and this is what you need to focus on. But as business owners, we don't get that luxury, right? We need to know, and that's why I said initially you need to say, okay, well, what are you trying to solve? You need to know what your problem is. And then these are kind of the dummy steps to say, okay, now I'm going to work backwards from my problem to decide how to survey. Because a lot of us are doing smaller transactions, right? And we're trying to see what will stick. And so if we try to survey everyone unilaterally with one type of survey, we're not going to get to the objective that we want in order to make the moves that we want. So it's a little bit different, I would say, than, again, a larger corporation, because we don't have the luxury, A, of volume, and B, of tons of trial and error.
Yeah, we're dealing with a few hundred clients a year instead of tens of thousands.
Exactly. So you have to pick, and that's part of what we'll talk about too, but timing is important, right? So you have to be sure that you're doing it at the right time in the right way. So as we go through here, think of which journey, right, or which stage is most appropriate for your needs. And then you can talk about how you put them together. Okay, so collection, that's number 1. This is one, frankly, that I think many business owners, and even, again, large businesses, Apple is one of the only ones I can think of that, and Disney, oddly enough, that do a phenomenal job of this. But most companies, once they feel established, don't feel the need to, quote unquote, collect anymore. But collection is taking a step back to say, what do they need, right? Like, as basic as it is, you have a business, you think you have a problem that you're solving, but is it? Right? It's like taking a pulse to really understand, do you have a new product or service or existing product or service that fills a gap in the market? That's number 1. Number 2 is, who are your ideal customers, right? Do you know who you should be fishing for? And do you know what motivates them to purchase? And then also with that in mind is, do you know what you need to do to resonate with them, right? What is your messaging? What is your differentiation? We talked about this a lot in class, right? Okay, we need to define our value prop and we need to have a story and all of those things. Well, my first question is, okay, but does anybody care, right? So the collection stage is really more, I mean, you could be as huge as broad market research that you pay for people to do blind research studies to ask them 5 questions about what you're hoping to solve, or it could be even more targeted in a focus group or something like that. But either way, you're trying to validate that you have a strong business case. And a lot of us haven't ever done this. We start a business thinking that it's a good business, and we don't really know why it's a good business and what people are expecting to get out of it and how you can position it accurately.
We think we do, but we might not.
Yeah, and so, I mean, again, you always say, okay, well, validate what you believe is true. And it could be, I mean, again, I thought a couple of times in class we did this. I would say a form of collection for us was even our own feedback and iterations when we would post something about our new, adventure and what we thought we would do, or hey, how do we position it? And this is our, net outcome. Like, that still is a collection. That is a form of market research, is gaining feedback, right? So the next one is conversation. Conversation. Yeah, conversation. So the next, it basically is trying to tell you, okay, now we have, our first stage is we validated that what we are trying to sell is good, right? Or needed, or desired. And now we need to say, okay, what will compel them to actually buy it, right? Why do they need it? And more importantly, why do they need you, right? This kind of feedback, I will say, right, is probably where I make the most money with customers, but it's probably the least important for you right now, right, at this stage. Because frankly, if you don't, again, have the volume, you don't have a proven methodology, you don't have a customer success stories, it's harder to have these kind of conversation things where you're really digging into the competitive advantages and disadvantages to better understanding your alignment and timing and your sales execution strategy, and to talk about, hey, did this script work better for you, or did this visual resonate more versus this? Like, this is more of the, I would call it a post-mortem after their first interaction with you. And it's not bad to get, don't get me wrong. Like I said, this is where I make the most money because people spend money to get win-loss analysis and competitive intelligence. But for you, right now, what you really need to know is, do I have a product that works? And how do people feel after they've used it? Not why are they going to use it in the first place, right? This is kind of that middle stage. It's the, what I tell clients is, it's the perception, not the reality, right? They haven't experienced it enough yet. Like, as an example, right? You go into a restaurant and you purchase something, right? The early stage is going to be, okay, what do our visuals look like? What does our menu look like? What do we have on Google reviews and that sort of thing? That's kind of the collection stage of information gathering. But the conversation for you is just probably them going up to the counter and deciding whether or not they're going to do it and what they're going to do and how that experience was. Well, that's great information, but no, what do you really care about? After they've eaten, how do they feel, right? So you have to know what part of the journey is important to you. So I would say, again, this is super great and wonderful and important, and I actually think creates the most change within organizations, but this is a lot later stage evaluation reviews. Make sense? Okay. All right. Care. This is the one, right, I think everybody knows and uses probably most often. I know several of you, John, I know you do, Dan, you do, right? You do customer feedback surveys, NPS, right? So how do you make them feel, right? After you do something for them, what do they feel about you after? It could be service related. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so that's an example I'll show you. So NPS is called a Net Promoter Score. I have a hate, kind of love relationship with NPS. I think it's a great, it's kind of wonderful how it's created a movement where people want to get You're fine. People want to get a net promoter score because what it does is it asks, it's a one question survey that probably 95% of all businesses do that just says, how likely are you to recommend X to a friend, colleague, associate, whatever. Family member, yeah. If you're not gonna do anything else, doing that is great because the benchmarking around it is so robust, right? You can tell someone in a corporate setting, my NPS score is a 40. By the way, it's also a very confusing metric. From a negative 100 to a positive 100 is the scale, but it's based on a rating of 0 to 10. So it's really dumb. I hate everything about it, but it also is really, it's a very easy, simple way to quantify to others externally what people think about you. Exactly. So if it's the simplest way to relate to satisfaction to people other than you, I don't believe it helps you. It helps your brand. It helps your maybe even customer retention. If there is one question you're gonna ask, it can't be NPS because then it is reliant on literally everything you just said. It's reliant on, what if they didn't like the way that the TV turned on? It took 3 seconds longer than they thought. Or the color wasn't what it looked like in the store, or what, like, NPS is such an ambiguous question that is left to complete interpretation versus, I mean, it would be amazing, and maybe you could even get 2 questions in if you, okay, all right, what's our NPS? That's great. How likely would you be to recommend us? But more importantly, how would you rate your overall experience today? Like, there's nothing else that you, right? Or how would you rate your overall experience at our store? Or how would you rate your overall experience with the food? Or how would, you see what I'm saying? Like, and you can be very, very specific, and then you get an actionable answer versus, okay, well, why do you feel that way? You have an open-ended response, but what do you do? So I think NPS is the reason why NPS is so valuable is because it has become kind of the best-in-class one-question survey, and people expect to get it. But for me, as a business owner, I don't care if my NPS is negative 80 or is positive 80, because at the end of the day, I have no idea what the hell triggered it. I don't know. I don't know. But one of the things I hate most about NPS too, to your point, as far as are they detractors or are they promoters, is kind of how they're divided out. You can't be a promoter unless you're a 9 or a 10. So you talk about positive scores, like unless people rate you a 9 or a 10, they're not happy, which is not true. Some people rate you a 7 or an 8 and they're pretty damn happy. They just don't rate people 9s and 10s.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be reflected that way.
People about that kind of stuff anyway, so
exactly.
How likely am I? Very low.
And that's anyway. Okay, so, but the point is this is a critical point in time where you want to gain feedback because it's a point of reference for what just happened, right? Right after they're done working with you, asking them that question solicits their real candid feedback, right? And also, I would say, right, again, I talk about the value proposition of doing these types of studies. I would say it also makes you look like you care more just by asking the question. Like, it gives you brownie points to say, hey, I care. You don't want to badger them, but definitely asking for feedback. I've only had one time in the thousands of interviews I've done where somebody's been like, this was the most horrible experience in my life. I can't believe they spend money doing this, right? Usually I get feedback like, wow, I wish I had decided to work with them, because who takes this time and money to try to get feedback on why people don't work with them? Like, it's a good thing. All right, the next piece is commitment. Now this likely will be for people who either are in an industry where you have multiple purchases, right? Ongoing purchases or multiple purchases. So you have a customer maybe who comes to your store once a month, right? So recurring revenue. right? That continues to happen over and over again. Or you have an existing client who you've worked with and they go from buying one thing to buying a different thing, right? Or longer term engagements, right? In a B2B sense, you could have, okay, you purchase and it's a 6 months engagement and I want to know how we're doing at each of these phases in our workflow, right? Again, this is very, very important for growth and for, I think the stat is, and I'm going to get it wrong, but I'm pretty sure most businesses nowadays, right, 70+% of their revenue is retained revenue, right? So it's recurring, retention-based revenue, right? Because it's obviously easier for you to sell to somebody who's been to you before than it is for you to acquire a new customer. You don't have to pay for that customer to come back. You also usually get to do a quicker sale. It doesn't take you as long. They also know what they want because they're well informed, right? So it's much easier to retain a customer than to get new customers. I will caveat that also by saying when we get to this commitment stage, a lot of times you need to be very cautious as to when you ask for this feedback. And we'll talk a little bit more about timing later, but especially if you're already getting initial customer satisfaction feedback and you also want to get maybe some market intelligence or you're putting out a new product and you want to get feedback, like you got to be very careful about when you ask them to continue to tell you how great you are, right?
So let's back up for a second. Are
Yeah.
you saying that the survey question should be different depending upon where in the C's you are at?
Absolutely, 100% needs to be different.
Because this is an area that I struggle with as a commitment because I may not see a customer for 5 years.
Yeah, and then that would then not be commitment, right? Then what would be is it would be going back to the conversation and the conversion of a, hey, how did you like our transaction? 100%.
Well, that's part of the problem is my post-engagement is not there. That is something I need to work on, obviously. But because it could be so long between service events for any
Yeah.
customer, based upon when they needed service. Unless they've just got bad appliances, which does happen. But most of the time it's so long in between services.
Which is a good thing for me.
Well,
If I don't have to call my appliance repair guy for 5 years, then that's
right.
a great thing.
But then how do you remember?
Yeah.
Exactly. And
That's my problem.
And do you know you, and then say, oh, well, if he could do my Samsung, could he also do my this? So I would actually,
Like most of my clients are one and done, but I still want to know that. I still want to know those answers. That everything you have up there, like I want to know that. But most of my guys are one and done.
okay, but so I'm gonna say let's even give your specific example. If it were me, if these were my clients and I went, I separate again the type of questions by these C's, right? But to your point, if you may not have another transaction for a while, I would recommend for you specifically to have 3 questions and an open end. One of them to be overall satisfaction. One of them to be which of the, like more of a market research and assessment type question that's like, hey, which of the following things do you have serviced on a regular basis? Or how often do you outsource services versus having an expert come? Or when was the last time? Like an investigative question. You can have NPS if you'd rather that than CSAT. But then the next one would be, like a question about like, when could we reach out to you again for X, Y, and Z? Or how would be the best way for us to continue? So it's almost even soliciting them, but it's really more asking them to like, what information do you want from us in the meantime to help you? Is it maintenance feedback? Is it information on new products and services available? Is it, hey, just a hi, hello, or hey, a reminder that you may. This last one I want to hit on, and I'm going to show you kind of a visual again that I give my clients, but it's just something for you to look at, is culture. What's great about us is we can just do all of this ourselves, right? A lot of companies hire people to do employee surveys, employee satisfaction, exit interviews, all of those things. But you don't have to. As a business owner, you can even do these yourselves. What I challenge my customers with as well is when we think about culture, it's not, and this is going to sound so horrible, but it doesn't really matter if your employees are happy, right, or satisfied. It actually, it matters if your employees feel empowered and confident, because at the end of the day, what they feel innately, either personally or about your company, is what is projected to your customers. So again, we talk about NPS for Net Promoter Score with customers as a best practice question. And then you talk about employee satisfaction and, oh, how happy are you? How satisfied are you with your job on a scale of 0 to 10? Who cares if there's a 2 or a 10, right? Like, that doesn't help your customers. It doesn't help you as a business owner. And it frankly doesn't help your employee. Rather, if you were to say to them, hey, what gaps are there in training? What resources do you need? What are the skills maybe even that they lack that impede the confidence that they have, right? How could you better help us retain our customers? Because then what you're doing is you're pivoting and allowing employees to own, right, the success of your clients versus yourself. I have some really super cool questions I can give to you guys later too, to do your own employee confidence survey, but I always call it an employee engagement and confidence survey, not an employee satisfaction survey, because you can have the happiest employees who really suck at their job or don't believe in what you're selling, but they're like happy. Myself, and I think honestly the most successful small business owners are successful because they truly are passionate and believe in what they do, right? And so I think people buy not what I deliver, they buy me, right? Because at the end of the day, they know that I will do everything I can to make it a reality. And that's probably part of the problem that I've always struggled to get employees, is I'm like, how can somebody else feel the same way I do about helping my customers? But there are people out there, but it's about asking questions in a different way to help understand where your gaps as a business, really, not even necessarily as an employer, sit. One of the most telling things I've seen in doing these studies with my clients is we'll do a study, we'll find out, oh, customers really like their support team. They think the support staff is super, super awesome, but they also hate the fact that nothing ever gets resolved. Okay, well, I need to find out why they like the people they talk to, but they don't feel like they solve anything that they do, right? Because at the end of the day, people will fire you if you aren't producing an outcome that they expect, right? And so then going in and doing a study to the employees, instead of me asking them how happy are you, I actually ask them, hey, when a customer has a question about X, whom do you go to within your organization for advice? Or when a company asks you, or a customer asks you for Y, how are you finding the information today that enables you to solve that problem? Or how often do you think that you review the processes that are in place and are they documented? I mean, little silly things, but that's what I would call a confidence survey, is identifying where there are certain skill, resources, or even system gaps within your company that are creating the strain between employee, success and growth versus customer retention and satisfaction. Right? Okay, so here's my little visual. This is actually something I give to my clients. You can see I'm all frou-frou all the time. But it really does just give you an idea of at what point in a journey, right? I call it my customer connections framework, but really the mantra is everyone that you touch is a customer, right? People who are thinking about going to your store, people who have already been at your store, people who are buying at your store, people who are selling at your store, right? Signage, everything, all of these things are customers, right? It's anything that impacts how you do business. And there's different points and different types of service you can do. Make sense? Bring it all together, kind of, ish. Okay, all right. Okay, so I know we've already actually kind of talked about some of this, so we can dig into it, but I wanted to go into, okay, so how do you create your survey? And there are tons of ways to do it, right? And so I am more gonna talk philosophically, right, than tactically, but it's pretty easy. First is to keep it simple, right? And we'll go into details more, but I think I've expressed that like 10 times already today. Also, this is something that people fail at so often, it drives me nuts. But begin with the most important question, right? Don't ask for, hey, please provide your contact information here. Hey, what did you think about today? When was the date that you came into our services? No, ask the most important question. If you want to get one answer, what question are you going to get the answer for? Period. Exactly, like what? At the end of the day, if you get 50 people saying, I visited you on the 14th of December, and you have no idea, what? Like, who gives a shit? Okay, so I had higher volume on the 15th or 14th of December. Great.
I don't know why,
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So always start, and I do this, even my clients are like, no, but Mackenzie, we really want to get contact information. Who cares? Like, I know we all want contact information, but at the end of the day, if you don't know what you're going to do with it, who cares, right? Get contact information another way. And then the last is prepare questions in a way, right, that maximizes the responses, right? So it goes out back to the question before, ask your most important question first, but then make sure that whatever flow you're in, it actually increases the likelihood that they'll complete it versus not. So I have a couple of things that I wrote down for tools. I'm obviously partial for a more robust tool because I'm super into analytics and reporting and all of that, right? I use SurveyMonkey. I don't love Qualtrics. I've used Qualtrics before, but it's like, it tries too hard to be, AI smart, and it drives me nuts. Like, I think, anyway. And there's other survey platforms. But yeah, but for me, I mean, again, and I'll just send it to you later too, but like, yes. So a Google form, or I'm not a Googler, I use Microsoft, and it's Microsoft Pages, right? It's the same thing, they're the exact same. You could still also get that, right? People could start a survey and do it. But you don't retain information always, depending on your settings, if they start a Google form and they don't finish it. You also can't track where they come from. You also can't, what I love about SurveyMonkey more than anything, and Dan, you'd probably be like the genius of it because you actually get people's contact information all the time in many different sources, is that if you import contact information into SurveyMonkey, you can create unlimited amounts of additional filters, right? So you could have a filter that has the date of service. You could have a filter that has the location they came from. You could have a filter that has, let's say, how old they were, right? Like, you could create your own custom data mapping and then add a name and a phone number and an email. You can still ask them for that later in the survey or other things that you may not have gained. But if you have retained certain customer data and you have that, you can import it into SurveyMonkey. And if Dan wrote down Mackenzie Wilson, 40, Harriman, December, 6 wigs, right? And you imported it into SurveyMonkey that way. And I even click on the link and I don't even fill out the survey, he knows. And then if I answer one question, he knows, right? So at the end of the day, you can then take a sample set of 100 people's responses, and then, and that's what, just makes me really happy inside. I can filter anything I want. I can say, okay, Dan, I only want to see people who are 40 and up. Dan, I only want to see people who purchased at least 6 wigs from me, not 2. I want to pay, and you just go to town, right? And you can see how your ratings change based upon that. You could even have multiple filters. That's why SurveyMonkey kicks ass. Yes, it also is super good about doing
What kind of cost involved that?
So for me, as a corporation that does it for all of my clients, I think I only pay I think I pay like $1,200 a year. But you can get like probably a $100 a year plan. And it still has not all of it. Like it won't have as much of the custom branding and white labeling. If somebody filled out a survey for you and said they valued your work a 9 out of 10 overall, and that was like across the board, but then you have somebody who you spent $100 with, or 10 of them that spent $100, and then one that spent $100,000, but their rating was a 6. Right? You see what I'm saying? You could ask, hey, where's the outlier, where's the this, but it's like if you are consuming the data yourself.
More of those $10,000 clients, well, let's only look at people that spent at least
Exactly. Exactly. Or, and you can, but the great thing is you can do the reverse too and say, okay, well then why am I resonating so well with my $100 clients? Like what am I not doing in these $10,000 deals that I'm doing with these $100 deals? And like, how do I need to speak to them differently? Yeah. So I don't know. I like it. But there's not a mechanism that needs to be, if you already have something that maybe could be added on, even CRMs nowadays, right? Because they have those automated transactions and things like that. There's so many plugins that you can use. There's a million ways to do it. I personally like to have a survey-specific tool just because, yes, I am familiar with it, but I also, depending on the type of transaction, I want to be able to be nimble in the questions I ask. And if you're doing a tool like even a Google form, unless you have 15 different types of forms, everybody's going to get the same question asked the same way. So if I do it in SurveyMonkey, I can have, again, if you import 100 of your clients from last week or whatever, and I import it, I can segment it and say, hey, this is this type of persona. Don't ask them question 2, only ask them question 1, 3, and 7. You know what I mean? So that's why I like it. Or advanced branching where, okay, if they answer question 1 of an NPS score of a 6 or lower, ask them this question. If not, skip to this question, right? You can do that in a survey tool. You can't do that in a Google form. And it's on multiple pages, so it's just more aesthetically pleasing. It's very mobile friendly, but you got to decide if you want to make the investment or not. Because if you're not going to use the data, don't do it. Anyway, all right. I already hit on this. We won't spend too much time. But I guess my main point is don't try to ask about them or gather your prospecting data and information before you ask a question that's actionable. Right? Again, you already know how I feel about the Net Promoter Score. If you are to ask one question, to me, it's overall satisfaction, right? How satisfied are you? And ask for something specifically, right? How satisfied are you with our service technician? How satisfied are you with our taste? How satisfied are you with our speed of transaction? How satisfied are you with or rankings and things like that? Do that as you go on. So they can become more detailed as you progress, but make it simple, stupid in the beginning. Okay, and then the last one is, kind of best practices to not get people to stop talking to you. Number 1 is limit your open-ended questions, right? Who wants to write novels all the time? Now, let me caveat that. Everybody likes to write a novel once, usually, if they have something important to say, but they don't want every single question to have to be effort. They want it to be easy. So like the Likert questions, I personally, it's like strongly agree, strongly disagree. I actually personally hate those as well. That's just a personal opinion. I have clients who love it. I like a numbers scale. Because for me, a 0 to 10 is very clear. You say 10 is the highest, right? And 0 is if it's non-existent, but it's also more actionable. Think to yourself, if you have a highly disagree and a disagree, what's the difference, right? Or if you have somebody on a scale, and a lot of people do a scale of 1 to 5. Okay, so is a 3 good or bad, right? Versus if you do a 0 to 10.
A 6 and a 4, we know a 4 is bad and a 6 is at least better. We know that they're more like it's better right in the middle.
Exactly. So you can quantify And again, depending on your N number, if you only have an N number of 5 total customers, having the middle be a 3.5 says nothing to you. Versus if you have those same customers and your average score is a 7 or an 8, then you know, oh, okay, there's probably some outliers either direction and it's more actionable. So, and everything is subjective with surveys, right? Which goes into my, obviously, my soapbox on needing to do interviews, not surveys. But I think in the place that we're in, surveys definitely meet the requirement for customer feedback now. But always, 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 if you do a number scale, please do 0 to 10, right? Like 0 to 10. And you could even do a slider, like nowadays they have sliders, so it's easier, so you don't have to even do all the bubbles. It's up to you. And then my second favorite thing I tell people is a lot of people are like, oh, multiple choice, and then they just like have, they say multiple choice, but it's like a multi-select, right? Or a single select. Like, I hate those. I would rather do ranking questions, because then even if something is not that important to someone, it forces them to prioritize so that at scale, again, you can see where the wave goes. Versus if you say, hey, select all that apply. Okay, well, okay, right? There's no, again, emphasis.
Some of those questions are okay, but they're not as targeted as you want them to be.
Well, yeah, but even select all the, like even for you, oh, okay, so what services did we do? Select all that apply, right? Sure, but do you care? Like, does that even matter?
I'm going to send it to them, I already know. Too.
Exactly. So that's a wasted question. On the flip side, you could say, hey, of your experience today, what did you value most? The total price paid, the promptness in our timing of delivering the service, our ability to quote quickly, our
Knowledgeable staff.
knowledge, exactly. And then you can either have them rate them, which is great, or you can have them rank by order of importance. So that at the end of the day, what does that do for you? That tells your team, hey guys, even if you're 15 minutes late, but you end up answering a bunch of questions to them, they're okay.
Yeah.
They don't care, right? Like, so ranking questions to me really create impact. That's just my personal preference.
Oh, I get that. That makes a lot of sense too.
So Mackenzie, you phrase it rank in the order of satisfaction or
Yep, important. So, and I wouldn't rank satisfaction. You want to quantify satisfaction. So yes, if you wanted, so in an ideal world, right, we just listed the things that we would ask them about their experience.
I have guys that are on a job right now, and like at the end of the day, I could send out some survey that says how, like those things, like said, that they showed up when we said that they were going to show up, right? Like that they finished it like in a timely manner. You didn't waste your whole day. That they did it, they put it where you wanted it to. They were helpful and friendly. They answered all your questions.
And most people, the way that they do a survey, most people would do that survey and say, which of these was the most important to you? Or which of these were? So you either get a multi-select of a bunch or you get a single select of one. And I say don't do either of those. Do a rank.
Yeah.
Tell us by order of importance how these were to your experience or whatever. And then if you can push it, if you've got a transaction that was worth enough, then you can do, okay, rate our performance in those same areas, right? I mean, that's pushing it depending on how much time you have. But I say if you already got overall satisfaction and then you understand what their priorities are, again, as I looking at data, if I find out that the number one most important thing was understanding them and the industry and experience, and your average rating is a 3, well then right now where you're failing isn't in your boxes, it's in the staff not knowing what they're doing. You know what I mean? So that's how I would do it.
I know this might be off topic. I have to go soon, but how do you feel about rewarding people for doing their stuff?
Oh, I don't believe in incentives.
No.
I do not. I don't believe in incentives.
Not
Now,
even like, hey, we're gonna have this ridiculously long one that they have to do in order to get that? Because
so if you're doing a market, so the only time I say yes is if you're doing a market research, blind research study to a bunch of people and you're kind of trying to just get hundreds of thousands of information and like information gathering versus like customer feedback. Now in a consumer world, I will say.
Like don't throw out a survey that says, hey, you guys bought $2,000 in garden boxes from us. If you fill out the survey for us, we'll give you a free refresh next year.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Now, what you could say is if you do this, like for repeat purchases, especially for smaller transactions. So if somebody goes and buys food, you could say, hey, complete this and get $5 off your next. That's a little bit better because it is an incentive, but it also implies a future purchase, right? So you're making money and saving. But if you're going to say, oh, we'll come out next year for, no. Yeah. Answer is no. Hard stop. Never. Never, ever.
Why?
There you go. That's why, or Sarah wanted to ask why.
I get why.
Well, the why is A, it minimizes the quality of your survey responses, right? Like, and their value in you, because if they are doing it, they're either going to do it because they care or because they want to share, or they're doing it for an incentive. And so it muddies the water with quality responses versus not, just analytically.
People just start like, oh, I just gotta fill this out, right? So 5s across the board, who cares, right?
Yeah. And I think even more than that, at the end of the day, you're in a business, right? And so you want to make money. So by spending money to get feedback that's not necessarily accurate, I just think it's a waste. I just think it's a waste.
I mean, like every Panda, when you talk about food industry, every Panda you walk into, every Cafe Rio, they have at the bottom of their thing, like, fill out this survey and you get a free dessert, or you get,
well,
you know,
but
free
again,
the next time you come in, or things like that.
And
Every restaurant on the planet does that.
next time you come in, yeah. So I am again. That's why I'm not in a consumer, and I'm not in a consumer business as much, right? Like, well, okay, with my travel thing, I would definitely, if they purchase with me after their experience is done, I would ask them, and then I would say, hey, if you complete, which I wouldn't, but if I did, I would say, hey, if you complete this, when we do your next whatever, I'll waive my transaction fee, right? And that's worth it because I still get my commissions, right? So I'm not saying you can't incentivize, just make sure you're not spending, right? As long as you can assure that whatever incentive you're providing solicits more spending from them, then you're really not spending money. You're selling more.
How about like in his case, like a referral program or something? Do you ever think about?
Yeah, a lot of people. No. A lot of people do that, right? Hey, if you but.
You have a hard time structuring it? I don't know.
Referrals are hard for me. Like, I wanted to do referral programs for a long time, but it's like most of my clients are one and done.
Give them money back
Mail
if
them
they,
a gift card
but
or
I
something.
would not do that in a form of a survey anyway, right? So you get a survey, you get the feedback, and then later down the road, hey, who do you know who you can refer for our business? If you do, then exactly, we'll send you a $50 Amazon card.
So almost like they complete the survey and then your next response could be like,
Later.
hey, just so
Exactly.
thank you for the survey.
Exactly. But you don't want to taint the data of the survey with an incentive. Now, again, high transaction, like even Travis's business, right? It wouldn't be bad to have something there, right? Panda, whatever, that did say something like, hey, how was your service today? What was your experience like? Give us feedback, write us a Google review, da-da-da-da-da-da, and receive X. There could still be something like that.
Yeah, for Travis to throw a thing on the bottom of his receipt that said fill out the survey and you'll get 15% off your next purchase or something like that. That's not a big deal.
Exactly, but again, you're only spending money to get money, right? But I also will warn you, right? So there's good and bad in it, right? There's a good in it in that you'll get a higher response rate and more completion, right?
My employees $5 and a client.
Yeah, but the bad part again, I always talk about swaying and tainting results.
Yeah.
If you're asked by me to tell me today in a survey how I did, you're more likely to give me a high score than if Dan goes to you and says, hey, could you just let us know how Mackenzie did today so we know for the future?
That makes sense.
Right? Like, so there's a balance. I always tell my clients to make sure, and again, I do interviews more than surveys, but to make sure that their staff tells in their sales cycle, in their customer engagement cycle, always tell them ahead of time, hey, our company believes in iterative feedback. So we are going to always be asking you for feedback. Please provide it when it's given. That's the kind of push I tell my staffs, my customers, employees to do. I try to get them away from being like, hey, how was Michael's service? Michael, make sure you ask them, and Michael, when you ask them, make sure you tell them that it's going to reflect on you, because that's not going to be as authentic.
Yeah, I get that. That totally true.
You could even say it's anonymized. You can use whatever trigger words you want to.
Corporate level stuff, that makes sense. For us smaller businesses, where if I say like, hey, how did the event go Friday? It goes to one employee. Like everything would target down to like the service of one person. So what would you recommend for us with the scale that we're at?
Well, but as long as it's not your employee, though,
Asking for it?
that is asking for it, and you're saying as an owner, I want to know how these are going, they're fully anonymized, or hey, listen, we're taking a thing that everybody loves is we take this information and use it in aggregate so that they don't think that I'm being singled out by each person. Those two words alone, anonymized and aggregate, like allow, whether you are a small business or a large business, because they don't know how many customers you do or don't have. At the event, you won't have two people, right? So they won't know, oh, 1 + 1 = 2, right? I always say that, and again, you'll get more candid responses. So you can still have your employees and your owners and your everyone else pushing to get feedback, but you just need to position it as this is an iterative, continual improvement, best practice that we do. We want your specific feedback about this event, but please remember that all of your information will be anonymized and put in aggregate with all other responses. And then people are like, oh, okay, good. Then Joe Bob isn't going to get fired when I say he sucks.
Yeah.
What
Even if he is, because he sucked.
what kind of incentives can we provide our employees that isn't the whole avoiding the issue you're talking about? Like, is there? Because like I went to condos for my wife's birthday and doing all that, and the employee or like the server that we had was super great. He's like, hey, I fill out the survey. If you mention my name in this thing, like I get a kickback and kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, well, I really liked this. I liked him. I want them to know, but again.
What if you didn't?
Yeah.
Right?
So how? Yeah, it's like.
Because is he going to ask? So he probably felt that you had a good experience. So he felt comfortable saying, hey, please do this and mention my name. Well, what if it were me there and I had had a horrible experience? There's no hiding my feelings. So do you think he would have asked me? No.
No. So how do we get all forms of feedback versus cherry picking?
So again, I think it needs to come top down, best practice. This is a regular expected initiative that is completed and everyone has to comply. You still, I even have some clients who will literally say, hey, Joe, you had 15 new clients this quarter. None of them did our survey. And then, oh, but whoever, you had 5 new clients and all 5 of them did it, right? Like they literally send out a quarterly report to say who's complying with this and who's not, and everybody sees it. Now, everybody does not see if Joe or Bob's clients are happy, because that's not for everybody else to have, right? You could talk to Joe or Bob, but it is important to know, hey, you're participating and you're not. And yes, like Michael said, you could give an employee $5 for every completed one. That doesn't mean they get to see the result. You can tell them whether the feedback is good or not. If we start collecting the data, it's data. That's how they're incentivized.
So we could even phrase it of like his employee, hey, give this to feedback, good or bad, I still get a kickback, so please be honest.
Exactly. Again, that's how I would do it. I think people are more likely as well. That's why people hire me, right? It's not because I'm so brilliant at doing this stuff. It's because I'm a third party. Well, I mean, okay, no, I'm just kidding. But it really.
Mine's Mackenzie. You don't pull off humble very well.
She just made that. Yes, you are.
But really,
You're a third party.
No, that's it. That's the advantage of. I mean, I get paid because people know they get better data when it's not coming. But in a small business,
Results makes a difference, right?
and in a small business, that's not necessarily possible.
Yeah.
But I prefer giving feedback even as a consumer if the owner comes to me and asks, not the technician, right? Or if the salon as a whole asks me, not the person that worked with me.
Not Jenny who's doing the service for you, right?
Yeah, like that's just me. I will 100% of the time, again, just because of who I am, do surveys when I'm asked, except oftentimes, like you use the restaurant example, I don't if someone says, hey, I get a kickback, or hey, mention my name. Because in my mind, it's like, okay, so what you're really saying is you want me to give feedback so you get an incentive, not so that you can make improvements on your service.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and again, everybody's a little bit different, but that's why I say positioning it as an organizational thing or a growth or an opportunity to better serve them is much better than, hey, I want to pick out why Dan sucks.
Yeah.
Well, and again, we talk about customer feedback. If we're getting customer feedback and surveys, what's the best thing to do at the end of a survey, right? Like for me, with my corporate clients, what do? I redirect them to my website, which sucks, so don't judge. But I, you know what I mean? You could easily relink them, especially in a SurveyMonkey type tool, relink them over and even program it to only link them over if their satisfaction rating is above an 8 to a Google review. So that they get done with the survey, thanks so much, and then their final thank you page can be contingent on how they rated things earlier. So one thank you page could be like, thank you so much, your feedback is super important, we really feel bad that you had a sucky experience, we want to improve it, blah, 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 blah. And another one could be, thank you so much for your feedback, you rock it, could you please post it everywhere to everyone on Google? But be careful, if you leave it open-ended and you don't know what they will do before they do, don't give them the Google review option.
Looks like you had a hard time with us. Can you please email us? We want to fix your situation.
And that could be it. And then if it is high, then you already know, and it's no touch, right? Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, you were willing to do this survey. Now will you share? And it may not, I mean, you obviously haven't had a bad experience with that, right? Like the chances of them getting through a survey, seeing a Google review thing, and then doing it because they're pissed is a lot lower than if they're happy. And I always, so, and that's what's interesting too, is I always tell my clients, so they always ask me, again, I do interviews, right? And so after the interviews, and some clients I'll do it for very rarely, but I always tell them, I'm not asking them at the beginning of my call, I'll only ask them at the end if like any of the information they shared could be used for content and collateral and things like that. Because
When do you ask them that? Sorry.
at the very end, so like I'll go on a 30-minute conversation and I'll know, man, this guy loves them. He should be on a stage professing everything. Then every once in a while, I'll ask them at the end, like, oh my gosh, you said so many great things. You gave so much good feedback. Would you be willing to have this information shared more broadly? Because at the beginning of my calls, I always say, this is confidential, it's internal, it's used for their purposes only, it's not shared externally, like, because they need to know it's a safe space, right? But,
Anonymous, the client's not going to know that you
well, no, my client, I do tell them that they know. If they request to be anonymized, then I give it to them. But I guess my point is with that is reviews and testimonials and white papers are fundamentally different than customer feedback, because customer feedback is really about perception of very specific targeted things. And if you're lucky, you can get into the emotions and the value in customer feedback, but really you're just getting a pulse when you talk about feedback. That's why these interviews are important. But even in the interviews, the level of comfort goes extremely down when you ask to have a conversation and an interview with somebody about their experience so you can post it online or you can do a review, right? The level of transparency and the depth of information and quality decreases significantly. I'm not saying you can't use that as collateral later, because again, if I ask at the end of a call, oftentimes they'll be like, oh yeah, I'd be happy to be a reference, or oh, I'd be happy to write this up, or oh yeah, you can use it. I record my calls even, and I've had clients be able to use the recorded calls in their branding and marketing messaging because they've gotten permission from the client. And there's nothing better than listening to somebody say how great somebody is. Like, that's way better than seeing it on a review, right? So, but yes, I always keep them differently because they're not equal, right? And they're not inclusive of the same things. And often the reason why people would leave you a bad Google review is because they do want your business to suffer, right? They're not giving you a Google review to help them better in the future. But in customer feedback, they are doing it because they want you to do better, or they expect they have to work with you again and they want it to be improved, right? So there's totally a different mindset that goes into anyone giving feedback on a review or a survey. Totally different. And it's valuable even as a business owner if you knew that and you hear that and you take those reviews and you do whatever. But that's not going to help you. That's really not customer feedback, because at the end of the day, well, what could I have, like, if you position and you would have asked Soraya, what could I have done to create a better experience, or what were you expecting that wasn't there, or how do you want to see things in the future? Getting customer feedback and having someone complete a survey implies that you are investing in what you want to change for your business, and therefore they're also investing in you even if they didn't have a good experience. But a Google review is literally an opportunity to bitch or profess how amazing, help your friend about something. But it's external, it's not actionable. Yeah, but I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you to do one more thing there. Because yes, we all do that, right? Okay, so you look at the worst reviews. My question to you is, who cares if they reply? My actual question to you is, based on what they replied, are more recent reviews signifying the change that did occur or not? So like if, for example, I went into a place and I said it was 40 degrees and you couldn't even feel like you could feel your toes, and it was awful, and it was uncomfortable, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then the owner replies back and says, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. We definitely meant for it to be at 70 degrees. We will continue to do that for the future. And then I see another review that came after this that maybe wasn't as bad of a rating, but they're still saying, oh my gosh, it's so hard to go in there because it's so cold, right? Like, who gives a shit that they replied and said, oh, don't worry, we're going to make it comfortable? They're not making it comfortable. And that's a stupid example, but it's like an easy one to quantify. Reviews that are actioned based on what feedback was given and committed to. So these are my things about surveys. We've already talked a little bit about a lot of these, actually. Timing, which I'll give you a couple of good examples. Frequency, how often. And how do you make it easy, right? Okay, so we've talked about a lot of them, so I'm just going to go through them quickly. The timing and frequency thing, right? Especially in a consumer business, they don't want you to ask how you feel about them every second of every day. So don't ask, right? So if they are repeat customers, you need to somehow be able to create a methodology in place to trigger only asking them at certain times. I always say, ask them the first time, obviously, right? What is your initial organic experience like? And then if it's a multiple purchase, the way you can, I would say, like track it is, okay, are there a different type of purchase that they're doing? Or are they engaging with more people or larger volumes? That's how you can do it. But I would just say, people don't want to be asked, at least overtly asked, every time they purchase. If you have a sign that's up so that they have an opportunity to always leave a review, like the clean bathrooms, is it clean or dirty, do you want to, right? That kind of thing is fine because it's, low pressure, low touch, but it's available. Other than that, be very careful about how often you ask existing customers. My recommendation is if you have longer term engagements, right, you always want to ask them annually. If you're trying to be proactive, like for example, you may think you have a one-off purchase, but if there could be something next summer that they do, a month or two before your season gets busy is when you would want to ask a survey.
Landscapers that buy from me every year, like,
Yes.
like I see like the B2B on there, like.
But you want to do it ahead of time. You want to do it before a transaction, a couple months before, or right after a transaction. So you kind of want to, again, time it. I always tell people, and I know even in a consumer business, this is the truth, unless it's an immediate thing where you have them complete a survey on the spot with you, try to avoid asking for feedback Fridays through Mondays. Like, people really actually don't want to give it. They just don't want to. They will if they have a couple minutes or whatever, or if it's immediate, that's fine. But other than that, the lowest response times are always Friday through Monday. Now, they may complete, the thing that people get confused about is they may complete a survey over the weekend if you gave it to them earlier in the week because they're like, oh, I'm gonna make sure I do that. But they surely will be less apt to do it if you send it to them on their weekend, right? Okay, and then again, you guys can look at this more, but I'm looking at reminders is an important thing that I don't think most people do. Even in a B2C, if you have a small purchase, I still say you can send one reminder. If it's a repeat customer, 2 reminders is also okay. And then if you're doing more of a larger market research project, at least 3 to 5 times is okay. And you don't want to do it too much, but you also don't want to do it too little. You don't want to be like, oh, if they don't tell me right away, then it's not worth it, right? I'm not going to go into all of this because we've been doing this forever. But these are kind of some of the examples. We already talked about why I like SurveyMonkey the best. But there are other solutions, phone, text, other products that you may have that could integrate with it. Just know it won't have as many ad hoc and customized, things that you can do. So this is my last one, and then I have potential questions. No. So, and you guys can just take this, right? But at the end of the day, don't do a survey if you're not going to do anything about it. Like I hate people who pay me to get customer feedback, to tell them what their customers say, and then for them to pay me the next year to do it again, and they said the same effing thing. Like, don't ask for feedback if you're not going to do something with it. Well, the next thing is share all of the feedback too. Don't hide it from people. Again, there are certain things that may need to remain confidential, or certain things that maybe are even proprietary to your business and your best practices that they share, that they like, that you don't want to share broadly. But generally speaking, your staff and even your customers should know what people are saying about you. Like, that's critical. And then the next thing is, don't feel like when you create your first survey or questionnaire or call or whatever that you can't make iterations, because the best surveys change and adapt over time. Just like those 5 C's that I gave you, you may need different questions asked to help you grow your business at different time. So it's an iterative process. It's not just a one and done. I'll give you guys these. So I'm done. I put some potential questions that you could ask, right? Like, you can do those kind of things all the time. And then these are the only other things that I say to people to ask if you're going to do a call. What could have been done differently? And what one thing, right, would you like to tell this person for the future? Like, you would get you have no idea the most compelling stuff you can get. If you actually have a conversation with someone, ask them what one thing they could have done differently, even if they were happy. And then ask them what one thing should leadership know about them in the future. My clients actually, he coined the phrase parting shots. He said it's our parting shots because it's the last thing. What should I have asked you that I didn't? What final thoughts do you have for their leadership about what they should do in the future? You get some really compelling stuff that you're not even thinking about. Right there, those are the 2 questions. Was there anything a company could do differently? And then, when possible, save time for parting shots, right? Which is, what's the final chance for them to say one thing that they should do better in the future or do in the future? Yes.
Is it worth me even trying to survey those people?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's timing.
Uh,
Sometimes.
How do you go about like?
But
I
again, that
had
would be a
full
one,
conversation, yeah.
so that would just be a one question survey where you would literally
And there's
send
five
to them a
answers,
note
but, like,
after
is it
whatever.
Multiple choice. What's the main reason why you
Single
did it?
select. Yeah, one.
Single select.
Uh-huh.
What's the main reason you did it? Was it purchase? Was it price?
Was it timing? I
Was
don't
it-
know who the hell these guys are.
Yeah, was it-
They
was
were
it
badgering me.
reputation?
Well, not only that, but that's, so if you actually do follow-ups and you actually create another offer on top of like a survey and maybe see, just like, hey, what is it? The response rate is you get 30% of those people back. Just
Exactly, because they,
You get
and
30% back.
it's actionable. So you just have a one question, and then again, and we kind of talked about this for a second, but you can always leave one open end that says, please describe the reasoning. That's what the NPS does. You know, would you recommend them to other people? What is your reasoning for the rating below? You can have something like that too. But that's all I would do, and that would be
You told us to get a
brilliant.
bid, you did not end up getting anything with us. What's the reason why? And then if someone's like, oh, it's price, I can still call them and say, hey, you did this bid. We could do half of that job. There are things I can actually
Exactly,
do on that, right?
exactly. But again,
What if we just did
Positioning-
didn't install? What if we gave you just
but Michael, positioning is important too, because you don't want to say, hey, you asked us for a bid and then you didn't buy it. You should say something like, our records indicate that at this point we haven't scheduled your appointment. So not that you didn't purchase or not that we haven't gotten, you know, your money, but at this point you're not scheduled. What is, the, you know, would you please help us to identify the reason why? Timing, money,
went with somebody
whatever.
else, whatever it is?
And like she said early on, it's like you want to phrase stuff to get the answer you're wanting, the
Yeah.
outcome that you're wanting.
Exactly. So even if you don't, even if you are assuming something you don't know,
Well, yeah, we haven't gotten you on our schedule yet.
exactly. And it also, again, to Dan's point, if they are going to get that feedback and then maybe purchase from you in the future because of your continued efforts, that even helps more too, because you're not saying we lost the deal, so now we want to know. You're saying, hey, I'm really surprised that this
Yeah, we
hasn't
talked for
happened yet.
45 minutes about your freaking project. Why
Yeah.
did I
So
waste, you know?
the other thing is, so people that are reaching out to you, are you logging that info somewhere, like where they're at or anything?
That's a no.
So the reason I bring it up is because I'm sure we've all
What?
dealt with it of, you know,
Ask a stupid
neighbors
question.
getting pesticide sprayed or wherever, and they say, hey, I'm in the area, or someone calling ahead.
Yeah.
Because I've had that where for you, it's you could keep a repository of all that stuff of people in these areas that didn't do anything. Like, hey, we're coming out this week. We could easily throw in this stuff there, and then you're easily able to flip it. So then instead of them waiting a couple weeks or whatever, we can get that done that day.
Yep.
So.
It's funny though, like I get, you know, you asked about like my ROI on trade show earlier. Like, I had a person call